Hey Duke, how are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Nice to see you too. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I'm beyond honored. The word I wanted,
Ah,
honor doesn't even cover it. Thank you so much for doing this.
I was very
But
honored to be asked.
thank you. Yeah, this is the fifth episode I've done, and I've just been interviewing people in my life from politics, from pop culture, from philanthropy, and I mean, you're such a multifaceted person. I mean, you've been, through philanthropy, film. You're such an interesting person, and I just really wanted to talk to you, and I'm
Oh,
thrilled you accepted.
thank
Really.
you for asking me.
But so, of course, first of all, how's your family doing?
We're good. We're really well. The nicest thing is we're all together under one roof, which actually is a bit of an anomaly for us because Elton tours so much. He's always around the world doing shows, and my work, we're based in London, or my office is based in London most of the time, and so I spend a lot of time on airplanes going back and forth. So the fact that we've been able to spend so much time together under one roof is wonderful. It's been really fun, actually. I said to Elton that it bodes well for when the touring ends because I've been with Elton for 26 years and he's probably been on the road for about 25 and a half of them. And when he announced he was doing his farewell tour, we put all the plans around it. I thought, wonderful, great, we'll get to spend so much time together. And then, and then you think, oh my God, we've never really ever spent that much time together. I hope we don't drive each other crazy. But this has been a good test run for that, and we've just been having a great time. So the thing with what's going on right now in the world is everybody's all in it together. And so I think if it was just happening to a smaller group of people, it would be very hard not to get resentful. But the fact is the whole world is having to do this. So, you just got to get on with it, really.
Absolutely. And no, it's funny because my parents are in a similar situation where, I mean, Elton tours, as you said, virtually all year. But my mother's usually, whether she's working or just doing, philanthropy work, they're usually on the road. They're not usually in the same place more than 3 weeks at a time. So it's such a different lifestyle for sure. Um,
I think sadly there's going to be a lot of marriage counseling and divorces coming out of lockdown because I think a lot of people just aren't used to spending that much intense time together.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I saw, I mean, of course, I guess it was sort of to be expected, but Elton had to cancel the rest of his shows for the year, right? So
Yeah, well, not canceled, but postponed.
postponed.
So he's as committed to doing his tour as ever. He's been having a ball. It's been going really, really well, and he doesn't, he wants to say a proper goodbye to all of his fans. And so we're just saying, look, we'll just hit the pause button when it's safe for everybody to gather in that way again. Then we will, take those shows and move them to just, a safer, better time. So he has every intention of finishing the tour, which is
Yeah.
good news.
No, absolutely. And my mom had to do the same thing. She had some shows that she had to reschedule, and but the Go-Go's did as well. And it's, I guess for musicians, concerts in general, that's probably going to be one of the last things that comes back, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you think about it, and it's the largest gathering of people, and the more of the virus you're exposed to, the greater threat you have of getting very, very ill. And so, yeah, it's going to be one of those businesses that come back online later than others, unfortunately.
No, but for sure, I'm sure it's been great for you for all of you to get to spend more time with your sons. And I was thinking how insane it is that I met you when I was 11 years old. I remember vividly. I was it was at the Palais de Festival in Cannes because my parents and I were coming to see Elton perform, and you were kind enough to come and meet us and give us our tickets. And so I was 11 years old when I met Elton. I mean, when I met you, I was 9 years old when I met Elton because I don't know if you remember Dave Stewart's wedding in
Yes,
France.
yeah, and Joan Lepin in the south of
Exactly.
France.
Yeah, and I was 9 years
Oh my
old.
God, you're making me feel old, Duke.
I apologize. I was just like,
That's a
but
long time ago.
uh, unbelievable, almost 20 years ago. And I just remember that was an amazing wedding because, I mean, not only were you guys there, but Mick Jagger was there. It was just an insane, the only wedding
Didn't
I've still ever been to, crazily enough.
didn't Deepak Chopra do the vows on this platform in the water in the middle of the? I've never seen anything like that. It was crazy. I said, "Who's this guy doing this spiritual stuff?" And someone went, "Oh, it's Deepak Chopra." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Guess that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, no, I mean, and yeah, it's funny actually. Another thing you'll appreciate this. My dad reminded me of recently was that Paul Allen was there,
Yeah.
piece. But it was so funny because my dad introduced me to him at 9 years old, and I said, "Oh, I really love Microsoft Word," and Paul was like, "Thanks, thanks." And it's like, it's like he's the creator. But I was 9 years old. I didn't really understand.
Listen, admiration comes in all shapes and forms, right? So the important thing is you are putting positivity out there for Paul
Exactly.
Allen. Bless him.
Exactly. No, and then I reconnected with you and Elton in 2010 through mutual friends, and I was thinking about the one night I remember I came over to your house or your apartment at the time for dinner, and I got to see Zachary, who had just been born at the time. And you
Yeah.
think he's 10 now, 10 years
He's
old?
9. He just turned 9 in December.
I mean, unbelievable. Time
Right?
flies. Time flies.
When you make the big decision to start a family, you think you have all the bases covered. And then you also think, well, maybe you'll bring some freshness to it or something. And then as soon as you get into it, you realize that all the cliches are true, like all the old cliches. And I found nothing marks the passage of time like having kids. It's insane. I thought our life was fast before, and now that the boys are growing up so quickly, and there's school holidays and birthdays and Christmas and Easter and losing a tooth and all that sort of stuff, it just feels like life has gone even faster. And I wake up some mornings and I look at them and I think, oh my God, you've grown overnight. Like I just see this difference. It happens literally before your eyes. It's an amazing thing. I feel very lucky.
No, I can't. It sounds amazing. I mean, I hope to have that, experience one day. But so in terms of just how you've all been staying busy, have you been watching films or any books or films in particular you've been?
But catching up on it, I mean, I always wish I had more time to watch TV and film with Elton. And, when he works as hard as he does and tours as much as he does, he's often tired or we start watching stuff and he falls asleep. So we've been diving into a lot of Netflix. In the evenings, Tiger King is such a major cultural, global
You've been watching that.
tour de force. Of course, you have to watch that. You can't miss it, and you just watch it, and your jaw is just wide open. You can't believe the craziness you're seeing. We watched Don't Fool with Cats. I don't know if we're allowed to use 4-letter words on your Instagram chat, but I thought that was fantastic. I love really good. I always think real life is so much more interesting than fiction, and I always love nonfiction books for that reason. And I love, great documentaries. And the other one we watched the other night, which is really inspiring, is The Pharmacist, which is also up on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really enjoyed that. So we've been doing a lot of that in the evenings. And then, our office is in London, so I wake up in the morning and I have this flurry of emails to deal with across the Elton business and across the AIDS Foundation. So I spend my days doing that. The boys have a tutor that they work with online. Their school set up an online curriculum for them. So they are doing all their schoolwork with their tutor online. So they do their schoolwork. I do my business work, my emails and stuff. And then I hope by the afternoon I have a couple of free hours I do trying to keep up with my gym. Thankfully, I've got a Peloton at home, which I'm really, really lucky because I like spinning a lot and just, doing stuff with the kids whenever I can.
No, and of course, I mean, you both have been insanely busy because obviously you had the concert, the iHeart Living Room concert, just at the end of March, which raised $10 million.
It's last I heard it was 12, and I think it's gone higher since then, which was amazing. That was a case where they had the iHeart Music Awards scheduled, and then the world virtually shut down overnight, and they had this TV slot booked, and they couldn't do a live award show. Mm-hmm. And so John Sykes, who's one of the heads of iHeart, who's a really great friend of ours for many years, he said, "Look, we're just thinking of turning it into this living room concert to just make people feel better about staying at home and raising some money for some people working on the front line. More specifically, getting food for people that are having a difficult time paying for their meals." And it was great. I hadn't picked up a camera since I did a documentary on Elton years ago, and you can't have a crew come in the house. You can't have all of that stuff. So they dropped off a professional camera in a disinfected bag. We put it out in the sun, came in the kitchen. I had an idiot's guide to how to set up a camera. and put a lapel mic on Elton, had a camera mount mic, and just, you know, we shot it here at home. And I think everybody that did it got into the same spirit. And what I loved about that show is I felt sometimes you can overthink things, and sometimes people have too much time, and then egos get involved, and it gets kind of, or you overthink it. I think everybody just trusted their instincts and handed everything over, and the people that put it together, I thought, did a great job. It was a really inspirational hour. It was very powerful in our house because our sons, you know, you explain to your kids what's going on in the outside world, but we don't watch very much television, and we certainly don't watch any television news.
Right.
And there's no context for a child as to what's happening. And when they sat and they watched it with me live, they watched it with the whole family, and they saw all these shots of all these other kids at home and parents at home and teachers at home. I could feel their anxiety going down. Like, it was very reassuring for them because they watched it and they thought, I understand now everybody is doing this, and I see everybody doing it. And that was very, very good for them. And to raise all that money is amazing.
It's unbelievable. And no, it's funny because I actually just rewatched Tantrums and Tiaras last night, which is incredible. I mean, hysterical, and so many great moments. But the fact, I was thinking to myself, wow. So yeah, I mean, I was wondering whether you had any sort of experience like that since then for the last 20 something years.
I mean, I've had not as a cameraman, I've had experience as a filmmaker, and I've produced some films and sat in lots of edit suites, and you get an understanding of how, you know, how things cut together and how to, you know, you need things to cut to, and you need continuity, and you also have to have variety for the viewer's eye, because if you're just looking at one fixed shot the entire time, even the most exciting performer in the world, it can sometimes feel a little flat. So you have to find ways to put energy into what you're doing. So but you're right, I hadn't picked up a camera, and that was a very different. When I shot Tantrums, there was no digital technology at all. It was a high-8 videotape, one of those little mini cassettes, and it was a home video camera that I worked with an external microphone with gaffer tape wrapped around it. And now you look at the quality and the sound you can get with an iPhone. It's pretty amazing.
So literally it was just you with the camera, and that's how you did the filming for the.
And our one guy who is with us here in the house, who does security, he held an iPad with a teleprompter on it, so Elton could follow his script.
Yeah.
But that was it. I mean, if we brought any more people into the house, the risk of bringing infection into the house, which, you know, Elton is 73, and we just don't want to put him at any risk of contracting the virus. So.
Right. Well, I read that when they brought in the piano for the One World performance a couple of weeks ago, they disinfected it before it even came in, or until we came into the garden. Even
we put it at the end of the driveway. We didn't even want, like, people dropping a piano off and coming into the house. So they say the sun is very good at wiping out the virus. So we sprayed it and wiped it down. A few people commented about how shiny it was, and left it in the sun. And that was the iPad that I'm talking with you on now, on a tripod, filming the keyboard from one side, and then iPhone on a little handheld jobby, and I just moved back and forth with that. And I had some help with one of our sound guys. We sent the sound to them, and they just balanced it all off, so it sounded nicer for television. But one take at the end of the driveway. I think the neighbors liked it. So.
I mean, that is like, that would be incredible. Seriously. I can't even imagine.
Well, we don't have a piano in the house here, so there was no other way to do it.
So my dad actually said to me, I said we were going to be talking, and he said, ask David, why don't they have a piano in the house? I said, it's probably because he doesn't want to have to play for people, you know, if they come over. You know, it's just like, of course, if there's a piano there, the expectations that he's going to play.
I think when you're someone like Elton and you do 90 to 100 shows a year, I think a piano, as much as he loves what he does, it's work. And so he doesn't bring work into the house. And even the way he writes, he always goes into a studio with a lyric that Bernie gives him, or Tim Rice or someone else gives him. And he very much kind of goes into, like, I think a work sphere, work mode with it. And so we have a piano in our house in Windsor, and he does sit down occasionally and play it, but not very often. Like it's interesting. People are like, well, doesn't he have to practice? And I'm like, well, if you do 90 to 100 shows a year, you're practicing, every day kind of thing.
Totally. And there's rehearsal and there's sound checks and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be doing it probably when you're home. That's your downtime.
Yeah. And and you're right about, people asking him to play. I say it's the equivalent of, you wouldn't go around to someone's house who was an accountant and put your tax papers in front of them and say, hey, we finished dinner. Would you look at my taxes and just make sure, I've got the calculations right? I mean, you respect people's work as work and fun is fun. So.
Absolutely. And I loved seeing the basketballs behind the piano. That was so cute.
100% authentic. We just left the basketball hoop up. The boys and I shoot hoops at the end of the drive sometimes. And that was where the piano had to go. And we didn't see a reason to move it because it's our home, it's our driveway, and we're a family just like anyone else. So.
Absolutely. Now, and in addition to the benefit concerts, I read that the foundation, the Elton John AIDS Foundation, has announced a $1 million emergency relief fund for COVID-19. Yes. So maybe you could share with our viewers a little more about that and what that entails.
Sure. I mean, we continue to do work year round with the Elton John AIDS Foundation. And the most important thing is the most vulnerable people in society have access to healthcare. They need to get access to testing to know their HIV status, and they need to get access to treatment. And we're now dealing in a situation where the world's healthcare resources are being stretched beyond their normal capacities. And that's going to make it harder for people to get access to healthcare. And it means healthcare is going to have to change and adapt to meet the needs of an environment where there's less of it going around and people are stuck in their homes and not wanting to venture out. So we added $1 million on top of the funding that we already do so that we can address those very special needs to make sure that people who need to continue to get tested and need to get their medicines, we're going to do more mobile outreach, go to them more, find ways to get medicines taken to people, find a way to have more in-home testing done. Because the thing we've learned with HIV/AIDS is you have to be consistent. You have to continually, if you start medication, you need to stay on it. If you're negative, you need to constantly check your status. If you're positive, you need to stay on your meds. The other thing is stigma and fear stops a lot of people from getting an HIV test and a lot of people from picking up their medication. And now, if they're scared to go to a health clinic or hospital because of COVID, they're going to be even less likely to do something about HIV. And you don't want anybody having their immune system being compromised and challenged in this environment where this virus is going around. We've seen the most vulnerable people in our society and the people who are most immunocompromised having a really hard time with COVID. And so it's important that we adapt the work that we do in order to, continue to consistently deliver services in a challenged healthcare environment.
No, thank you so much, seriously, because obviously living in LA and being a gay man, and I'm on a city board, and we actually talked about the fact that, not just financially, the fact that, healthcare is going, services are strained at the moment, but just a lot of like the LGBT Center, I think, has had to limit their amount of STD testing that they've done, just because it's, it's dangerous for the workers. And, so I think that's incredible, on-site testing or mobile testing. And I think it's so important.
And there's a big shortage of personal protection equipment right now. So, funding that we can put towards the purchase of that to protect the people who are working in the clinics and doing the actual tests for the people who are still going to clinics is equally important. And our starting position is we're working with partners we already have experience with. Because we're a grant giving organization and we work to very rigorous high standards. We expect everybody we give money to really deliver a demonstrable result and spend the money efficiently and effectively. So we've already done that vetting process with our partners that we work with. We're now saying, okay, your environment's now twice as challenging as it was before. How can we top up the funding we already give you to allow you to continue to do what you're doing to the same high standard? That's important because we just can't afford, with HIV/AIDS, we just cannot afford to take our foot off the pedal at all. Consistency is our greatest weapon in dealing with this disease. And we've made phenomenal gains scientifically and amazing gains in terms of the people on treatment. But there's still a lot of undiagnosed HIV out there and a lot of people who don't know their status. And for a whole myriad of reasons, they don't get tested or they don't pick up the medication. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're really digging in and doing most of our work now, because undetected HIV is, if you take an antiretroviral tablet now and you have HIV, you won't pass the virus on to someone else. It will bring your viral load down to a point where undetectable is untransmittable. And if you're negative and you go on PrEP, it will stop you from picking the virus up. So as long as people have access to that information and access to their status and the medication, there should be no new HIV infections. We should be able to, if only we had something like that available for COVID today. I think one of the most disappointing things that I'm witnessing, and having spent over 20 years working in dealing with viruses, is the lag in testing. We don't seem to be able to ramp up testing quickly enough or extensive enough, and everybody wants society to go back to normal, which I understand. The economy, we need to get people back to work, but until we understand where this virus is and who's infected and who's carrying it, you're kind of flying blind. Particularly when so much of the COVID transmission is asymptomatic. It's people who are walking around with no symptoms at all, and they're shedding virus all over the place. So we really need to make sure that we get testing up to a level where you can, when people are gathering together, that people have been tested and they're not carrying the virus and spreading it to someone else.
Absolutely. And, I think one thing that's very important for people to remember is that just because we are dealing with this coronavirus doesn't mean that other diseases and other, problems aren't taking place. And so it's really important. Of course, we want to support the organizations that are doing work on this specific area, but whether it's cancer or AIDS, there are other organizations. And it's in times like these that those organizations are going to, perhaps not get the resources they usually would. And so, I really commend
Thanks
for what you guys are doing. And so, more broadly, though, the foundation I read as of the Oscars event that you did has raised $450 million since its inception. I mean, that's just beyond mind blowing. So congratulations on that.
I mean, we're very fortunate in that we have. To have Elton as an asset, the number of people that we can reach, the consistency and the loyalty that we've had from people that support EJAF. We have people that support us year after year after year, who come to our events, who continue to write checks. We're very lucky as a charity to have that, and we are not going to stop until HIV/AIDS is over, and 2030 is the goal. It's the global goal. Set by UNAIDS, and we think it's completely achievable. As I said earlier, we have all the medications at our disposal. We have the tools that help us stop it dead in its tracks without a cure. What we have to do is address those gaps, attitudinal gaps, stigma, and also a big issue in this country in particular is access to healthcare. And this is where we're going to see, unfortunately, COVID is going to have a terrible impact. Is people that don't have health insurance, don't have access to health care. They are not going to get the treatment and care that they need. And that's going to be devastating in some households and some communities. And that's a gap we need to work, I think, actively at closing.
For sure. And, PrEP has basically changed the world in the last few years. And I think, as you said, we're getting close to the point where hopefully we're getting zero new infections, zero new transmissions, but there is some way to go. And the healthcare issue, obviously, as you said, in America is a real problem. And in rural communities, the work that you're doing right now is so crucial. So
the important thing is younger people, which is where we're seeing an alarming rise in new infections. They don't think HIV/AIDS is relevant to them. They sometimes think it's something that only affects an older generation. And I would encourage anybody who thinks they may be at risk from getting HIV to really seek out the information and get the facts that they need. Like COVID, it's a disease that knows no boundaries, no barriers. anyone could contract it. And information and affirmative action is the best way to minimize your chances of contracting it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I wanted to ask you also about any film or TV projects that you're working on. I just rewatched Rocket Man as well. It's such an amazing escape during these times. I mean, in particular. So I think I texted you when I saw it and just said what a beautiful film it was.
Thank you.
But
yeah, I mean, that was 13 years to get into production because Elton was quite adamant that he didn't want to present the world with a sugar-coated version of his life story, or that chapter of his life story. And the fact that it was also a fantasy way of telling the story meant, you had to spend more money on cinematography and digital effects and all that kind of stuff. So it made it an R-rated film with gay subject matter with a higher budget, which when we started the journey 13 years ago in Hollywood was had everybody incredibly nervous. And a lot of people would have given us the money to make the film if we cut the budget in half, if it wasn't a fantasy, if we'd gone for a PG-13 rating. And Elton said, I didn't live a PG-13 life. How can I don't, the whole point also of charting someone's journey through addiction is if you don't show the really dark stuff, then I don't think you get the empathy that you need for people who are struggling with addiction. And I also think, the redemption isn't as satisfying. So we were fortunate. I'm very grateful to Matthew Vaughn, who I partnered with as a producer on the film. He was a fantastic partner. He brought a level of production expertise that I didn't have, that allowed us to get the film in at the right budget level and just relieved. I say I'm so relieved it turned out really well, because it's such a personal project to work on. And it's not just Elton's history, it's our family's history, it's my son's history. And I didn't want to spend the next 25 years of my life apologizing, saying, yeah, well, we thought we were making a good film, but it really didn't turn out very well. Sorry about that. The big watershed moment for me was when we screened a rough edit for Elton, and he just broke down and wept. And I said, okay, what do you think? And he said, don't change the frame. And I was like, phew. Because if he hadn't liked it, then that would have been a real problem. So he was very happy with what we created. But in terms of new projects, so to answer your question, I'm developing a lot of theater projects right now. We have two. One is The Devil Wears Prada, which we want to bring to Broadway in about a year and a half. And Elton has written some fantastic music for that with a great lyricist called Shayna Taub, lyricist, actress, musician. She's an amazing lady. They've created some great music. So I'm one of the producers on that. And then we've also, Elton and I have always had this long-term fascination with Tammy Faye Baker and the foundation of the Electric Church in America, and her life story as the journey of a Christian woman and all of the theatrics and crazy stuff that went on in her life. You don't have to make anything up. Again, real life is so much more interesting than fiction. And so we're taking Tammy Faye's life and turning that into a stage musical. And with that, Elton has written the music with Jake Shears from the Scissor Sisters. So Jake, yeah, he's done the lyrics, Elton's done the melodies. And
that's
again,
going to be like an acid trip, basically. I can imagine.
You don't have to make anything up. It's all like, you cannot believe that life, the characters, the highs, the lows, the villains. It's and I think the thing about Tammy, which I find so inspiring, is I think a lot of people thought she was kind of ridiculous, but actually she was a real Christian, in that she put her arms around everybody. She accepted everybody. She didn't pass judgment. Their church was non-denominational. She had a pastor with HIV on PTL in the early 80s. Talking about, being a pastor and living with HIV, which was like unheard of, and that's beamed into the center of America. And so she had a very pure heart. Unfortunately, I think she was very naive, and I think a lot of people around, the minute you get that stranglehold on, or you get that foothold with power, and they have their own satellite and all that stuff, then suddenly you attract all the negative forces, and that's what happened, unfortunately. But I think it'll be a fun theatrical ride. I think people will have a laugh with it.
I mean, I cannot wait. It sounds incredible. But so the focus is you're focusing largely on stage for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Elton has a lot of, you know, he's created some terrific musical theater over the years, and we're looking at things that he can get involved in that don't involve him touring. And the great thing about a stage musical is that, you know, you bring together the most wonderful community of people when you work on it, and it's very collaborative. And he loves working with teams, and he loves collaborating, as do I. And so, and we love great musical theater, and people continue to go to the theater. So, yeah, it's fun.
No, it's true. It's self-sustaining. And I think, you know, I don't know if you know, but the Go-Go's had a Broadway musical, was it last year? And, you know, unfortunately it closed, but, you know, it's going on tour, and it was on for 6 months. But I think, you know, the idea with Broadway musicals is at a certain age, like my mom's in her 60s, you're like, okay, I want to be able to find a way of making an income that doesn't require me to go on the road for, you know, months, you know, at a time. So
Yeah.
So no, that's fantastic. And but one question I wanted to ask you about being a filmmaker, and I know you produced and directed films and documentaries over the last 25 years, but was that ever something that you wanted to do specifically when you were young? Did you always aspire to be a filmmaker?
I was obsessed with film and cinema when I was in my as early as I can remember in my teens. I went to the cinema all the time. And then when I was working to pay for my university, I had a bunch of different jobs. But one of them, I worked behind the desk in a video store, which I loved. And I used to, you know, go home with armloads of films and watch them at home. And then I loved standing behind the counter and making recommendations. I ran my university film society I went to the University of Western Ontario. So I ran that organization, and we had this great repertory weekend cinema on campus where we programmed the films and chose them and screened them, which was really fun. And I learned a ton about cinema doing that. I took some film courses at university in addition to business. So it was always a great passion of mine. I actually wanted to be an actor, funnily enough. I did so much theater and drama and acting in high school that that was what I thought I wanted to do. And then I thought, well, I'll get an education first, so then I can see how I feel, and I'll always have that to be as a foundation. And then I don't know, I just kind of went more on a business, marketing, creativity in business kind of slant. And being a filmmaker, though, was always something that was very, very appealing to me.
For sure. And I absolutely love tantrums and tiaras. And I was thinking about, like, so that was about 2 years after you had started dating Elton?
Yeah, I mean, I had made a decision to leave advertising to pursue a career in filmmaking.
Right.
And I was developing scripts and, you know, working my way around the industry and trying to get to know people, networking and doing all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Elton was, you know, going out on the road again. And he said, why don't you come and make a documentary about me? He said, I get lots of offers to make documentaries, but if you do a documentary about me, then it'll be honest. It'll be, you know, a real insight into who I am. And I said, okay, thank you. That's a real honor. And I'd love to do it, but I want to make sure you let me have creative control. Because if your manager is going to crawl all over it and turn it into, you know, sanitize it, then my reputation as a filmmaker, you know, could start off on the wrong foot. And when I picked up the camera, I had no idea what I was taking on. And I worked with a great producer who guided me a lot and helped me a lot while I was working and shooting it. But it became like video therapy for me, because I was going into Elton's world on the road and I'd never seen it firsthand before. And I was very new to show business and very new to everything that had been normal in Elton's life. So much of it was very abnormal to me, weird, in fact, strange. And so the camera kind of gave me this shield that I could go into situations, and I used the camera, a means of asking questions and interrogating and shining a light on stuff that was just very odd to me, and things that, you know, we needed to work out in our relationship. And it gave me the courage to challenge Elton in a way that maybe I wouldn't have done if I didn't have a camera in my hands. And so it became something very different from what I initially set out for it to be. But I'm really, really proud of it. I mean, technically it's a bit ropey because of the technology that was around at the time, but I'm very proud of it. The content, I think, stands up well to the test of time. And you can pull a thread through, not that I want to pat myself on the back for this, but you can pull a thread through tantrums led to the Osbournes because Sharon Osbourne watched it, and that I don't have a problem being associated with. Sharon watched it at tantrums and said, "Wow, our life is just as crazy as this. We should, do a TV series." And then Osbournes started this whole reality television thing, which is now, a big part of people's lives. So and I was inspired by a lot of documentary filmmakers as well. I mean, Nick Broomfield in particular was someone whose work I admired and liked. So I don't want to take too much credit, but you can connect the dots between those things in culture. And I get asked a lot, and I'm looking at the possibility of when Elton does his final shows of his farewell tour, I might pick up the camera again, because I think that's going to be a very big, significant moment in his life and in our family's life. And I might have some fun filming now.
That would be fantastic. That would be amazing.
He's a lot happier now than he was than he was 24 years ago. He doesn't things just aren't quite as now you have kids, it's not quite as colorful as it was 24 years ago.
I mean, there are moments like when he was talking about his different aliases for his hotel room names, and when he was
that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. And thankfully, the kids don't have to ring up the hotels and ask for them.
Right,
so
right. Oh my God. Yeah, and then the moment in France with getting the plane and then not getting the plane, it was amazing. It was amazing.
The famous tennis tantrum.
And it does actually, you're right, there's a very similar sensibility to the Osbournes, for sure. Like that documentary, the way it was shot and everything.
It is, well, it's, life on the road, life in rock and roll land it's just a very particular, very bizarre life. And
I always say being on the road is, for me, and I'm sure for my mom, when you actually are the one performing every night, it's not as fun maybe sometimes. But I always say, for me, like, that's such a unique experience, being on the road. It's some of the best times I've ever had in my life. So.
Okay, I'm going to turn. What advice would you give me to, you grew up with your mother in the public eye, in the music industry, great successful musician, touring around the world. You grew up as a child within that environment. What advice would you give to Elton and me for our sons?
That's what a question.
Is that a whole separate podcast we need to do?
maybe a little bit, but no, I just think, I think it's the more you can expose them to that experience, they one day they will look back and say, I'm sure, that those being on the road, on the one hand, my mom, I think, did try. That's why we moved to France. They didn't want me to be always exposed to the business and all that kind of stuff. But, being on the road as a kid, going to all these different places, being on the tour bus, or just that whole experience, I consider to be some of the best times of my life. And I look back on them, even times from when I was 8 or 9 years old. I remember every minute. I look back on them very fondly. So I would just say, expose them to it as much as you can, because, one day I always try to think, my mom isn't going to do this forever. And,
right.
And so even now, whenever she has shows, I try to savor it as much as I can. So.
Were you ever resentful of the fact that she had to give a big chunk of her life to the rest of the world, and she was still your mom and you needed her?
Well, what's funny is I don't feel that way, but like, for instance, I remember my mom and dad telling me that when I was a kid, I used to tell people that she lived at the airport because, and then she said that she felt terrible about that, and like that it stuck with her for a while. And I was like, I don't remember saying that, and I certainly don't feel that way now. I mean, I got to go on the road with her plenty, and she was around quite a lot, and my dad was here, so. I think in the end, at least for me, I remember the good times and I remember the good things, and I just savor those experiences.
We just had the boys on the road with us really since September, because we took them out of school. We had them homeschooled for that period of time. And so we've been in LA, Vancouver, and then we were down in Australia for 3.5 months. And the boys had a ball. I mean, they really, really enjoyed themselves, and they're being 7 and 9 is just the right age to do it, because they're not so caught up in their peer group and their community at school that they feel like they're missing out on so much back home. It's not like the dramas that go on when you're in your teens.
Right.
And you don't want to miss out on that.
You're in your own world.
Yeah, and you don't want to miss out on stuff and everything. So we've had a really wonderful time with the boys on the road. It's been so much fun. But that's nice to hear that it was a great experience for you, because you do, as a parent, you try to do your best, and everything in life is always about finding the right balance. And I think whatever goes on, if you're a working parent and you have kids and you have other priorities and commitments, everybody finding that balance is always really hard. It's really challenging, and you just hope there's enough for everything and everyone to go around. But the kids always have to remain the top priority.
100%, 100%. But no, David, I'm so grateful to you for doing this. Thank you for your time.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been really, really fun. Thank you for inviting me. And it's
really
great to see you virtually. It's been a while, but rather annoyingly, you haven't aged. So I'm going to be texting you to find out what your secrets are.
That's so sweet. Thank you. Well, you look fantastic. And my mom and dad send their love, by the way. And please tell the family that we send ours as well.
Please send. I think the last time I saw your mother was in an airport.
I think that's right.
I think it was at Heathrow. Funnily enough, I was walking through and I'm like, oh my God, there she is. And we had a lovely little chat, and exactly. There she was doing her thing.
Absolutely. Actually, I remember her telling me that, actually. Wow, so funny. But no,
well, be safe and well. Look after yourself, and I look forward to seeing you when we can all go back out in the world and
same here.
Get on with life again.
Thank you. Stay safe. Lots of love.
You too. Take care. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye. Let me turn this off now.